Airing on Asheville FM 103.3 LPFM in Asheville, this is The Final Straw Radio, a weekly anarchist and anti-authoritarian broadcasts and podcast emanating out of occupied Chalagi land in southern Appalachia. We bring you voices and perspectives from projects and struggles all around the world, and you can find our archives, transcripts, ways to follow us and support us at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org. This week we're featuring two segments. You'll hear Radio Ausbruch from Frieberg from this month's Bad News podcast from the A Radio Network, talking about repression and debanking of anti-repression projects like ABC Dresden and Rote Hilfe in Germany, based on pressure from the U.S. government. This carries heavy implications for prisoner support, anti-racist, and other social struggles. But first up, you'll hear an interview with Cooper Quintin, a senior staff technologist at the Electronic Frontier Foundation and developer of Rayhunter. Rayhunter is an open source firmware to turn specific hotspots into IMSI-catchers, effectively scanning for and logging any signs of fake cell phone towers, often known by the brand name of Stingray, in the area. Law enforcement has at times deployed these as a way of collecting information about phones in the area and could use it to intercept some communications like SMS, text messages, or phone calls. Cooper talks about what's known of law enforcement use of IMSI-catchers, what has been observed of the data collected by deployed Rayhunters, phone security at demonstrations, and related topics. You can check out the show notes for links to related projects discussed in the interview, as well as links to the February 2026 Bad News episode.
Okay, thank you so much for coming on to the Final Straw Radio today. Could you introduce yourself, your name, any pronouns or affiliations you'd like to share?
Yeah, hi. My name is Cooper Quintin. My pronouns are he, him. I work for the Electronic Frontier Foundation, where I am a senior staff technologist.
Cool. And you are coming on with us today specifically to talk about your work around Rayhunter. Could you share with us a little bit about what that work is and what you do with Rayhunter?
Yeah, so Rayhunter is open source software to find Stingrays, or IMSI-catchers. To explain a little bit about what those are, Stingray is a device that law enforcement uses. It pretends to be a cell tower, and it tries to trick your phone and any phones in the area into connecting to it instead of a real cell tower to get their IMSI, which is the unique ID that's associated with your SIM card. This can be used to identify you. IMSI-catchers are, or Stingrays, as they're also known from a popular brand name, are typically used to locate people very specifically, right? So police can ask a phone company for the location of a person, and the phone company can give location based on their relative signal strength to the towers that they're connected to. And this will give police about an area of about like a city block or sometimes greater in rural areas. What an IMSI-catcher can do is track a person down very specifically, right, to the exact location that they're in, or to the exact apartment that they're in inside of a large apartment building, and give cops the ability to track people down in manhunts and that sort of thing. The concern is that because they can identify all the phones in an area, they could be used to identify, say, for example, all of the people who are at a protest, or all of the people who are going to a specific mosque or an abortion clinic. And that's what we're more concerned about specifically. The other concern with IMSI-catchers is that they could be used to do what's called a man-in-the-middle attack, where law enforcement could potentially listen in on your phone calls or read the contents of any regular text messages, not like signal messages or encrypted messages, but regular SMS messages as you sent them. And that would be a big concern as well. So Rayhunter is a piece of software that you can install on a $20 mobile hotspot. These are the devices that take your cell signal and give you a little Wi-Fi access point, which you can connect, your laptop or your Switch or whatever to. So there's a lot of old ones out there that people haven't bought that are just sitting in sort of overflow storage that you can buy for $20 on like Amazon or eBay. And Rayhunter is a piece of software that you can install on that to turn it into an IMSI-catcher detector.
Okay. So how did your development process for this go? Like, how did the history of this get started? Is this a pretty recent thing we've been seeing with law enforcement, or has this been going on for a long time?
Yeah, so Stingrays are actually an older technology as far as the surveillance space goes. So like the sort of first noted use of them is to catch the hacker Kevin Mitnick.
Really?
And this was back in like around the year 2000.
Yeah.
They used a Stingray. Yeah. They used it. Actually, a triggerfish was the specific device they used, but they used it to locate one of the clone phones that he was using,
Okay.
and arrest him.
Yeah, I read his autobiography, and I think at one point there's like the manhunt for him, and there's like a helicopter overhead, right? And he's like, haha, what if that was for me? I'm like being totally overblown. It couldn't be for me. Like, how would they know where I am? And then it wound up being for him. That's hilarious.
Right,
exactly.
When the black helicopters actually are for you, and your paranoia is totally justified.
Anyways, sorry.
Yeah, no, they were actually driving a van around looking for him using a triggerfish device because they had figured out the identity of one of his phones that he had cloned, and that's how they caught him. And then so police have been using these for roughly the last 20-25 years, and they've been growing in sophistication. Right. So the first ones, especially like the Stingray, was sort of the one that really caught on and became, there's a term for this, like when a brand name becomes the name for like the generic name for the thing. Right. But that's what happened with the Stingray. And the Stingray only operated on old 2G networks. And there were a lot of problems with 2G. Right. And so the telecom industry came out with 3G and then 4G, which were more secure. And so the companies that build these devices had to come up with ways to attack these new protocols, right? 3G, 4G, and now, they're doing the same thing with 5G, right? But police have been using these for the last 25 years. And for roughly, we think like the first 20 years of that, they generally thought that they did not need a warrant to use these devices, at least for the location finding aspects of it. Recently, however, it seems like in the last 5 years, most police departments around the country have decided that now they do, in fact, need a warrant for the most part, which is good. And I mean, and the FBI as well. There was a FISA court document, the FISA court is the I'm blanking on what the acronym means. I think it's like Foreign Intelligence Surveillance something, authorization. Anyway, so FBI requested a warrant to use an IMSI-catcher from the FISA court and actually got turned down, and this was unsealed. And in that document, it mentioned that this was the first time that they had requested a warrant to use an IMSI-catcher. So we think that, basically around 2020, there was this Supreme Court decision called Carpenter that prohibited police from getting historical cell site location information, which is the sort of location information that I had talked about earlier, where the phone companies can give police how strong your signal was to the towers, and basically roughly where you were. Mm-hmm. It prohibited police from using that data without a warrant. And it seems like the law enforcement community interpreted that as also applying to IMSI-catchers. And now, for the most part, in the U.S., seems to think that IMSI-catchers require a warrant and therefore maybe aren't as attractive.
Yeah, I imagine the Rayhunter would potentially help kind of fill in the blanks there of when they are being used with or without a warrant, right? If we get enough data.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the reason that we built the Rayhunter project is because we were getting the impression that activists all over the U.S. were very concerned about Stingrays, which is, as am I. This is understandable, right? Yeah. But that they had the impression that Stingrays were being used all the time, right? And that basically if you went to any protest ever, you were, your phone was going to get caught by a Stingray. And I didn't think that was exactly the case. We had actually gone out. So I first got interested in this during the North Dakota access pipeline protests. So I guess this was in late 2019. Mm-hmm. Went out there and we had been receiving reports that the activists on the ground there were pretty convinced that IMSI-catchers were being used. And some people sent us some screenshots from some apps that really, looked like maybe there was some evidence of IMSI-catchers. So I went out there and brought some equipment to try to figure out whether or not we could identify IMSI-catchers being used on the protesters. So I brought a couple of phones loaded with some of the apps that existed. I brought a couple of pieces of equipment called software-defined radios, which is just programmable radios, and went out there and used the apps and scanned around. And what I figured out was that I had no idea what I was doing. I had like the apps were seeing some things, but it was really impossible to tell whether these were false positives or false negatives. A lot of the apps were tuned to look for signs of what we knew like 2G based IMSI-catchers did, right? And those sorts of attacks. And the problem was there was no 2G service out there at the No DAPL protests at all. It was all 4G out there. They also had a temporary cell tower parked in the field across from the protests, right? Which theoretically to give the protesters more access to cellular service, but like, what's the difference between a temporary cell tower and a Stingray? Well, it's who's operating it, right? So we realized we needed to think harder on this, and we needed to have an idea of how to detect IMSI-catchers better. We needed to have an idea of how native 4G or LTE IMSI-catchers might work, and we needed to just get better at this in general. So we worked on a couple of projects for a while, and then eventually I had another project called Crocodile Hunter, which required like thousands of dollars of equipment, and it required you to understand C programming and Linux, and it was great for me because I'm a huge nerd, but it was not great for the people that I actually wanted to be using this, which was like activists and journalists.
Yeah.
So we went back to the drawing board and came up with Rayhunter, which, like I said, it's $20. You install it, you throw it in your pocket, and it's easy to use. You don't need to know anything about Linux or C programming, right? And this is something that we think that activists all over can take with them as they go to protests.
Yeah, and for clarification, the equipment is $20 and the software that you wrote is free, right?
Yes, yeah, that is correct.
Okay. Anyway, sorry.
So with Rayhunter, our goals are to figure out how IMSI-catchers are being used in the US, right? And to test my theory that they're probably not being used against protesters all that much. But if they are, we want to know, right? That would be a huge concern.
Yeah.
And then our other goals are we also want to know internationally how often IMSI-catchers are being used, right? The law enforcement in the US seems to think they need a warrant, but that certainly might not be the case in other countries.
Yeah.
And then we want to have real sort of ground truth data about how IMSI-catchers work, like how they work on a technical level, and then how we can stop them.
Okay. I imagine that this stuff with the warrants has made them significantly less attractive than other options of surveilling people. So I guess it would make sense if they were trying to push into international markets if people here were getting a little bit over them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you look at like what police have access to, right? And like one of the tools that I'm looking at right now that police are using is a tool called WebLock from a company called Penlink.
Okay.
Which WebLock is a tool that takes the location data that your phone sends to advertisers and that your phone sends to like some of the apps that you use and scrapes all of that from the bidding markets where advertisers bid to sell you ads and puts it in a little map for cops to access. And so they sell this to cops, right? So like police can, using this tool, draw a circle around an area and see information on all the phones that have been in that area, for the last however many days, or all the phones that are there, And sorry, I say all the phones that are there right now. And I say all the phones. I shouldn't say all the phones, but many of the phones.
Yeah.
Any of the phones that have apps which are getting access to their location and sharing that with advertising networks. But for any of those phones that are in this database, they can also click on one of those phones and look at all of its, or a lot of its historical location, right? So you can see where that phone spends its nights. That's probably that person's home. You can see where that phone spends its weekdays. That's probably that person's work, right? You can see where that phone goes in the evenings, right? Or on the weekends or wherever. And that's a terrifying amount of information. which the police can get just, and ICE can get just by paying this company a small fee. So like when you consider that a truck mounted with an IMSI-catcher costs about $1 million, and it takes, at least, like 2 or 3 members of the police force who are super highly trained and have to go run this thing, why would they use an IMSI-catcher when they can just use this tool, right? Like, there are reasons you would use an IMSI-catcher if you really needed to locate a specific person in real time, right? Like if you're on a manhunt. But if you just want to see who was at the protest, or you just want to see where somebody probably lives, this other tool, this the penlink tool is cheaper. It's got no warrant requirements, right? And cops are going to use this every time.
Yeah. Would there be any reason to use the man-in-the-middle capabilities of the Stingray? And also for our listeners, you have a great talk at the Black Hat Conference where you talk a little bit more in depth about this history. And one of the things you mentioned was, I believe, a scammer in France was sending man-in-the-middle attacks to folks driving around.
Yeah. So the man-in-the-middle capabilities, yes, the police would love to do that, right? That is almost certainly going to require a warrant.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm too constitution brained here. Maybe I'm, but like it sure seems like listening to an active phone call should require a tap and trace warrant. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah.
Right. But
yeah. And I feel like scammers at least have helped people be pretty inoculated against random texts, even if it's like, hey, where are you?
Yeah.
Like, come on, I know where this is going.
So from police, it's definitely a concern, right? And especially in other countries where, here, as the rule of law continues to disintegrate and we continue to live in a, slide further and further into fascist dictatorship, I think that becomes more of a concern, right?
Yeah.
Like if ICE has been given total immunity and the ability to enter houses without a warrant, why would they necessarily think that they can't also record phone calls without a warrant, right? Like I think that's not a huge leap.
Yeah.
But yeah, the other side of the coin is that scammers are using this for man-in-the-middle attacks, not to listen to phone calls and text messages, but to send text messages from convincing numbers, right? So the story in France was there was this woman who was driving around France with some equipment in her car. She got pulled over because she was driving erratically. The police saw what they thought was a bomb in the back of her car, called out the bomb squad. The bomb squad took a look at it and called out the IT department, and they took a look at it and realized that it was an IMSI-catcher, right? And what she was doing, it turns out, was driving around sending people SMS messages from the phone number of the French health ministry, telling people to go log in and, update their data or whatever. It was basically a phishing attack to get people's credentials for health insurance, probably to do some sort of health insurance scam on top of that. The attack there is generally called an SMS blaster. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we're seeing more of, especially in Europe and in Southeast Asia. A lot of these sorts of scams were just like sending out SMS messages from real phone numbers that people, so to, give people more reason to kind of trust that's real.
Okay. And this is kind of an aside, but let's say someone has the cell site simulator. They're trying to scam you. You're busy. They drive away. And then you reply. Does the French health ministry just get like weird random replies?
Yeah, I think that they would. So, but the way, this feels a little sketchy to say, but if I was conducting this attack, what I would do is send a link along with that text message.
Yeah.
Right. And then just try to convince that person to click the link and say also say something like, this is an automated text message. Like, there won't be any, or, just type stop to stop or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
I think there's a pretty specific format to those text messages that like people almost never reply to. Right. Yeah, and if you indicate that it's not something to reply to, but like click this link to go log in and deal with your healthcare. Right. I think more people will click that link than will reply to the message.
Yeah, makes sense. Anyways, I've sidetracked us a little bit, but would you want to kind of talk about what it looks like for someone here in the US who's worried about law enforcement and not random scammers to get the device they need and set up Rayhunter for the first time? And then, like, what does the process look like of going to use that? Do you have to go like,
Yeah, for sure. So unfortunately, the setup is the hardest part. But the way this works is basically you go buy one of these devices on eBay, or there might be some left on Amazon. We found eBay to sort of be the most reliable place to find them. So the device is called a Orbic device, and there's a link to it. If you go to rayhunter.eff.org, you can find a link to, an eBay search for them in our sort of documentation and guides. You go buy one of these devices, and then once you get it, you go to our GitHub website and you download the latest release of Rayhunter.
Oh no, it's getting technical.
Yeah, I know. You already have to go to GitHub and download something. Then you have to open a terminal.
Okay.
You have to open a command line.
Okay.
And this is where it gets even worse.
Okay.
If you follow our documentation, you run one command. You connect to the Wi-Fi of the device. Mm-hmm. You run one command, and it should just install it.
Okay.
Once you have it installed, then it's going to have a little green line at the top that indicates that Rayhunter is running, and it's looking for Stingrays. If that line ever turns red, that means that Rayhunter has found something suspicious. Once that line turns red, you can again connect to the Wi-Fi and go to the URL of Rayhunter, the URL, it's in the documentation, which will take you to the sort of like web interface for Rayhunter. You can download the files of what it captured, and then you can send those to us on Signal, and we'll take a look at them and tell you what we think. For safety purposes, let's say like if you're at a protest or something, right, and your Rayhunter turns red, that might be a good time to turn off your phone and tell the people around you to turn off their phones, right? But yeah.
Do you need to have a working SIM card in the Orbic device to do all this?
You do not need to have a working SIM card, but you do need to have a SIM card.
Okay.
So what many people do is take an old SIM card that they have lying around, or if you don't have one of those, go buy like a $1 SIM card from, Walgreens, Walmart, Target, whatever, and just shove that in there like a prepaid SIM and just don't activate it, right?
Yeah.
It does not need to be an active SIM card, but there does need to be a SIM card.
Okay.
If you do have an active SIM card, you can get a couple of things. I mean, you can use the hotspot as a hotspot, right? Which is nice if you want that sort of thing. You can also get push notifications to your phone.
Okay.
When it detects something, which can be useful because otherwise you have to kind of pull it out and look at it every so often.
Yeah. Do you know offhand if any of the prepaid plans that you can buy with cash offer the hotspot? Do you know if it has to be a different configuration with those?
I bought one, and who did I buy it from? I can't remember who I bought it from now, but I bought one and it seemed to work just fine.
Okay.
Yeah, they're certainly out there. I think that it seems like some of them don't even recognize that it's a hotspot.
Oh,
so
interesting.
It'll work just fine.
Huh.
I wish I could remember who I bought one from so I could tell people to just go use that.
Because I might go try that with a non-hotspot one and see if it can work. Cool. So it sounds like if you're not totally technically comfortable, it's a little bit of an adventure, but if you have a technically minded friend, they might be a little bit disappointed by how easy it is.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That is exactly the reaction that we've gotten, right? Like our hacker friends and our technically minded friends are like, "Oh, this is so easy, awesome!" And then being who I am, being a giant nerd, I forget that most people don't just have a command line open all the time, right? And so for example, I did an install clinic with these, and I was like, now open the command line, and just watched everybody's faces drop, and I was like, oh right, that's not a thing that normal people do. So the best bet is definitely if you can, if there's somebody in your community, in your town, right, that is sort of more comfortable with the command line, a bit more technically minded, and you can buy 10 of these or so, and have that person set them all up, and then you can distribute them in your in your community or in your group or town or whatever.
Yeah. Do you know if there's any resources online for folks that might not have that person or want to be that person, but something goes wrong and they need a little help?
Yeah, for sure. So we have a documentation at rayhunter.eff.org
Okay.
that'll walk you through it. We also have a group chat on a system called on a website called Mattermost. There's a link to
Okay.
that in the documentation. You can join that and get help from us. There's also a few YouTube videos that'll walk you through the installation.
Oh, that's great.
I can't speak to any of them specifically, but like there's a few of them that'll help you walk through the installation.
We can link some in the show notes too.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for that. I just anticipate someone being really excited and then something going wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really unfortunate, but like the installation is also like the source of 90% of our bug reports. And 90% of our issues. Like it's definitely the hardest part. Once you get it installed, literally all you do is throw it in your pocket and go about your day, right? Like you got the hardest thing to remember is just to keep it charged and to check it occasionally to see if the line's turned red.
Do you have an idea of how close to the actual IMSI-catcher you need to be? Like, should you be scurrying around the protest block to block trying to get close to it? Or can you be like parked in a cafe somewhere a quarter mile from the action and pretty sure you're going to get everything?
Yeah, I get this question a lot, and the answer it's hard to answer because it depends on a lot of different things. It's going to depend mostly on how strong the signal is from the IMSI-catcher. It's going to depend on radio physics, so meaning like radio waves work based on line of sight, right? And like how high up the transmitter is, how high up the receiver is, how dense the area is with buildings, how dense the area is with people, can all affect, how far away you'll be able to receive the signal, right?
Yeah.
I think generally, if you're in a coffee shop a quarter of a mile away, you're probably not going to see it. I think for I don't think you need to like scurry block to block and be right up next to it, right? I think if IMSI-catchers were being used at protests, being sort of at the protest, right? Being in the group, in the crowd would be enough to detect it. Right?
Yeah.
And I want to say on that note that so we've been doing this project for a year now.
Okay.
And so far, we have not seen any evidence of IMSI-catchers being used at protests. There was one report in a publication called Straight Arrow News where they thought they had seen evidence of an IMSI-catcher being used at a protest outside of a DHS facility in Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
I disagree with that reporting.
Okay.
They actually had Rayhunter with them as well as a different system, and Rayhunter did not detect anything. The detections from the other system, I took a look at the data and I don't agree with their findings. I don't see any evidence that there was an IMSI-catcher present at that protest.
Okay.
So as far as I'm concerned, there's been very little to no evidence of IMSI-catchers being used at protests. I think it's unlikely right now.
Okay. What would that evidence look like? Just like the presence of an unexpected cell tower at a location where there normally isn't one?
So to get a little technical, it would basically look like a tower that is suddenly requesting your IMSI and then dropping your connection over and over and over again. And the best evidence would be if multiple people had Rayhunter, for example, at a protest, and they all detected that same behavior. That would be a really strong signal that there was an IMSI-catcher around.
Okay.
Other than that, we actually have recordings from real confirmed law enforcement IMSI-catchers that we've been able to capture in like a lab setting.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a ground truth. We know exactly what IMSI-catcher attacks look like.
Yeah.
And so we and these are the sorts of things that Rayhunter looks for, right? It looks for those same patterns that we saw in those commercial IMSI-catcher tests.
Okay.
So that's what we're looking for, right? And if Rayhunter had also found something at that protest, I would have been more convinced. But Rayhunter didn't see anything suspicious at that protest at all.
Okay.
And we haven't seen anything, really at any protests, right? We have found what we think are pretty strong signs of IMSI-catchers.
Mm-hmm.
Not at protest contexts, right? But it seems to be, really in usually in a large city, right? Like as a sort of one-off event, right? Which happens and then stops, which so far hasn't been coinciding with any protests.
Okay. What context have you seen this in? Do you have any thoughts on like the motivations of having them at these particular locations at those particular times?
So yeah, I mean the context we've seen them in is really like without context, right? Like it's
Okay.
just sort of like a random time of the day in a big city.
Yeah.
What we've seen from police reports though that do talk about these. So there was a court document about an ICE manhunt that used an IMSI-catcher. And
Okay.
they had this was HSI, specifically Homeland Security Investigations. They had a specific guy in mind who had been charged with a murder and was on the run, and they had tracked him down to a house in Orem, Utah,
Okay.
using an IMSI-catcher, right?
Okay.
So like ironic choice of a town given what would happen
Yeah,
there
not where.
just a few months later.
Yeah.
That was basically like for a manhunt, which is exactly what law enforcement says they need IMSI-catchers for, right? So like
Yeah.
it's hard for
Okay.
me to say, like, you can't, unfortunately, from the technical evidence, you can't say like, oh, it was this law enforcement agency and they were using it for this purpose, right? Like that's not
Yeah.
something that Rayhunter can give us, unfortunately. But like based on the pattern of use and based on the court reports that I've seen, it really does seem like for now in the US, they are mainly being used actually just to do manhunts,
Okay.
right? Just to do the sort of thing that they're supposed to do.
Have y'all been FOIA-ing stuff around cell site simulator use?
We have. It's hard to get good responses from
Yeah.
law enforcement about these.
Yeah.
We've occasionally succeeded in getting aggregate numbers, right, of how often they're being used, right? Like we were able to figure out that, for example, like where I live here in Oakland, the Oakland PD had used theirs like 3 times in I think it was like 2017 and 2018, right, respectively, 2 or 3 times each year. Another number that we got, actually not from a FOIA request, but it was from a FOIA request that got us marketing materials from one of the big companies, which is called Jacobs,
Okay.
that makes these. And in their marketing materials, they stated that the Fontana, California Police Department, which is a suburb, it's down in Southern California, a suburb of San Bernardino, had used their IMSI-catcher 300 times between, I think it was 2019 and 2020.
That's wild.
So, yeah. So they are using theirs constantly.
Yeah.
But other
data
and
on
I mean,
what?
this begs.
Yeah, go ahead.
This begs the question. Yeah, what are they finding a use for? Every other day on average, right? Like, how are they finding so many uses for that? And is there a judge there that's just signing all these warrants, or does Fontana, California, still not think that they need a warrant to use an IMSI-catcher? Right?
Yeah, interesting.
So if you're listening to this and you live in or near Fontana or San Bernardino, please get in touch and build a Rayhunter. We'd love more data from that area.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, since I have 2 questions. One, like, with kind of all of this concern about cell site simulators being used around 2020 in protests, do you think they just weren't quite as widespread as folks thought? Or do you think that their use has really tailed off since then, if you can speculate?
Yeah, it's hard to say because we don't have that, we don't have that background information. I was really looking for these in 2020 here in Oakland, and I didn't really find much evidence, but my system was not as good then, right?
Yeah.
I wish we had Rayhunter back in 2020. It's certainly possible that they were being, if I had to guess, I would guess that they, before the requirement from a warrant, they were being used a lot more than they are now.
Yeah.
Right. And how much is hard to say, right? Like, again, at the end of the day, this is a $1 million piece of equipment that requires some, highly trained cops to use, right?
Yeah.
I don't think they were, I think, maybe they weren't ever quite used quite as much as people think. Or maybe they were, right? But now that there's the warrant requirement, cops hate getting warrants, right?
Yeah.
That's paperwork. That's a judge they got to talk to. They don't want that, right? Especially when they can get this data without it. Data that's almost as good without a warrant, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so like the second question is, given what we are seeing with the trends toward surveillance taking place through that like geolocation data from advertisers, how do you think folks should respond to that as protesters?
Yeah, for sure. So there's a few things you can do. The best thing you can do, and this will stop many different attacks that police use, is to turn your phone off when you're at the protest. A lot of my peers give the advice of like, leave your phone at home.
Yeah.
And that's fine advice. I don't think it's realistic advice, right? People need their phones to get rides, to get in touch with their loved ones, right? To take pictures or document abuses or whatever, right? So like, I don't think that that's really useful advice. Turning your phone off while you're at the protest is a bit more realistic, and that would be the best protection.
Yeah.
The next best protection you can have, say you're like, but I really need my phone to take, I don't have another camera. I need my phone to take pictures or document abuses or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is to leave your phone in airplane mode
Mm-hmm.
and then turn it back on after the fact. If you also need signal or whatever to communicate with your, with your group or whatever, with your people while you're at the protest, or, if you need to communicate, I would first off recommend using Signal.
Yeah.
This is the bare minimum you should do, is use Signal, turn off any sort of face unlock or fingerprint unlock, because a lot of courts have decided that police can compel you to unlock your phone with your face or your fingerprint. But if you have a password, only a judge can compel you to unlock your phone with your password. And then to keep your phone locked with a strong password. And then also to turn off location services. So this is a setting in Apple or a setting in Android. You can turn off location services, which will mean that no application is able to get your location, and therefore they can't send your location to, databases like the one that PenLink runs, right?
Yeah.
Part of, as a bit of, what we call security hygiene,
Mm-hmm.
I think that right now you can take out your phone and go through the list of apps that have access to your location and turn off any apps that don't have a damn good reason why they need access to your location. Basically, like anything that's not your Maps app, turn that location access off. There's no reason for that.
Yeah. And then when folks are bringing their phones, if they're on and the police do take them, it's better to have them, like, the protections on the phone are stronger before first unlock, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So that is why I tell people to leave their phones off. Let me back up here. So the concern that we're advocating for here is that when you get arrested, police will take your phone and plug it into a machine called a Celebrite or a Gray Key, which will, if your phone is unlocked or if it can unlock your phone, will make a copy of all of the data on your phone, including all of your Signal messages, all of your WhatsApp messages, all of your pictures, your location history, all of your text messages, all of your contacts, all of your calendar entries, everything. It will make a copy of all of that for police to go through later at their own leisure, make connections between you and other people on the ground, and, troll for evidence to convict you or other people of crimes. The best protection you can have against Celebrite, well, first of all, is to not get your phone taken, right? Which is why people recommend leaving your phone at home.
Yeah.
The second best protection you can have against Celebrite is to have your phone in what's called before first unlock mode, which is where, either it's off or it's on, but you haven't put in your, or you've rebooted it and turned it on, but you haven't put in your passcode yet to unlock it. This means that all of your data will still be encrypted. And there's very little that the police can get off it in that state. And it also is less likely that police will be able to brute force your password and unlock your phone through force in that state.
Okay.
So if your phone has the ability, like if you need your phone for pictures or whatever, right? Like my recommendation would be to leave your phone off, get a digital camera, take pictures that way, right?
Yeah.
If you can't do that, right? That's going to be a financial burden for some people. I totally understand. Turn your phone on, but don't unlock it. Just use the little, camera button that's on the front, right? And take pictures without unlocking your phone.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. Easy. Much easier, I think, for a lot of folks than going totally
And then
without
when
it.
the protest is done and you need to call somebody or check in with somebody or get a ride home, then you can unlock your phone.
Yeah.
Right?
Great. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Also, this is a little bit of a tangent, but to bring things back to the cell site simulators, have you seen them ever or heard of them being used in like conflict situations? Like, let's say right now, Northeast Syria, so much of the conflict is really close to the border with Turkey, Ukraine, etc.
Yeah. So absolutely in conflict situations, cell site simulators are a big issue, right? Like we know that the US Army was using them a lot in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Oh, semi-recently.
They were, and I think it is reasonable to assume that they were being used not just for their manhunting capabilities, but for their identification capabilities, for their man in the middle attack capabilities, for denial of service capabilities to try to, disable IEDs that had a cellular trigger on them, right?
Oh.
For myriad reasons. And I think
Okay.
that you can assume, I think it's safe to assume that that cell site simulators are being used for these same reasons in war zones around the world, in Ukraine, in Syria, right? Like those are, we would expect that to be very common. I would love to get some data from Ukraine. I'm not willing to do that in a way that puts anybody's lives at risk, right? So it's a moot point, but unless somebody who's in Ukraine is like, yeah, I'll throw one of these in my pocket and I'm not going to think about it, and I carry a cell phone anyway, so I'm not worried about the extra risk to me or anything like that, right? Then but I don't want anybody to do that without fully understanding the risks. But generally, I would love to get more data internationally, right? Because we're not seeing these being used, for infringing on free speech in the US, but I would love to know what's going on internationally. And we actually have devices that work internationally. So the Orbic device, the one that's used for the US, will work in Canada and in South America and Central America. We have another device which is made by TP-Link. I can't remember the exact model name, but that should work in Europe and in most of Africa.
Okay.
And then the one blind spot we still have right now is Asia and Oceania. We still don't have we have one device that works there, but it's not a great device. We still don't have like a mainline supported device that works there, and that's something that that's one of our top priorities, is to get a device that'll work really well out there.
Okay. And you have some developers working with y'all to kind of beef up the support for the various devices, right?
Yeah. So this is an open source project. We have about 300 people in our channel right now. I'd say we have like, we've had contributions from probably maybe 20 or so developers. We have like a couple of core developers within EFF, and then we have a couple of core developers outside of EFF that are volunteer developers that have really helped us out a lot.
Cool. We'll keep our ears out for the updates for those other devices. Well, anything else that you would want to touch on?
Yeah, I think that the thing that I really want people to remember is that as we descend further into a fascist dictatorship in the US, that these people, they don't have magical capabilities, right? Like the panopticon is not perfect. They don't have the ability to see and hear everything you do, and they don't have 100% total surveillance of everything. And even if they did, we still need to fight back. We still need to not allow this takeover of our country, right? And I'm so proud of the people in Minneapolis who are fighting back against ICE right now and who are about to go on a general strike tomorrow, right? And I think what I want people to remember, and part of the reason I did this project, is I don't want people to live in fear, right? Like we didn't think that IMSI-catchers were that prevalent, and we didn't think that they had all of the capabilities that activists seem to think they had. And so far, we're seeing that to be true. And we hope that by spreading this information, people will be more willing and more excited to just go get out in the streets and fight back, because that's the most important thing we can do, right? If we live in fear, if we assume that their surveillance is complete and total and that we can't do anything, then they've already won.
Yeah. And I don't think we have time to go into it today, but there are a lot of other cool projects, specifically ones that use Bluetooth IDs to be able to identify and perform counter surveillance against like cop body cams. I think some Meta Ray-Ban counter surveillance relies on the Bluetooth ID, although I've also seen a project that is like has another way of trying to identify them that was maybe not 100% ready, but I can try and link it in the show notes for folks. And there's like a variety of cool projects like this that let us kind of get an idea of where these things that seem to be surveilling us everywhere actually aren't.
Yeah, for sure. Or actually are, right?
Yeah.
So if I do have 2 minutes, I would love to plug the OUI Spy, which is the tool that you were alluding to just now.
Okay.
This is a really, really awesome tool that, yeah, it's just a little Bluetooth dongle that you can buy, and it's a computer chip connected to a little buzzer, and you can load some software on it that will alert you whenever a flock camera, a license plate reader camera is nearby, whenever a Axon device, which is the company that makes the body cameras and smart holsters and other things for cops, it'll alert you when one of those is nearby. You can set it up to alert you when somebody's wearing Meta Ray-Bans, right? It's just a really cool piece of counter surveillance that I think is awesome, and I think that is a great tool for activists to have around to map out the surveillance in their cities.
Yeah. Anything else that the EFF is doing right now that you'd like to plug or bring to folks' attention? I know y'all do great work.
Yeah, so we have a lot of lawsuits going on where we're suing ICE, we're suing the government over Doge, we're suing ICE over the takedowns of various ICE reporting apps from the app stores. But the thing that I think is most important for people to know is that we have a really excellent set of guides called our surveillance self-defense guides that will give you a number of ways to make your own devices more secure and protect yourself from surveillance and protect your friends and family and community from surveillance. And those are constantly being updated, and we're always making sure they're accurate. We put a lot of work into those, and those can be found at ssd.eff.org.
Okay, cool. We will link those in the show notes. Well, Cooper, thank you so much for your time today and coordinating when we're going to meet and putting together your presentation that we'll link in the show notes and sharing all the information with us here.
Yeah, super happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me on the show, and keep on fighting the good fight. It's a really excellent show, and it's an honor to be on it.
Yeah, likewise, as a not so usual host, it's been great to help out with the project.
This is the Final Straw Radio, and you just heard Cooper Quintin of the EFF talk about the Rayhunter project. The Final Straw Radio is a proud member of the Channel Zero network of anarchist podcasts, and here's a jingle from another member of CZN.
Welcome to Propaganda by the Seed, a podcast about plants and the nerds that love them. We alternate between hour-long interview episodes that usually focus on a single species or crop, and shorter episodes that focus on topics related to plants like grafting, composting, and the rest. You can find Propaganda by the Seed on the Channel Zero network of anarchist podcasts at propagandabytheseed.com or most podcast platforms. I'll see you deep in the weeds.
Next up, we share a segment of Radio Augsburg of the A Radio Network on the debanking of anti-repression projects in Germany under U.S. pressure.
You are still listening to Bad News, angry voices from around the world, and now we're gonna listen to the feature about debanking produced by the comrades from Ausbruch.
Fuck off! Fuck off! We want freedom! All your racist sexist products, we don't need them!
Ausbruch.
Die Anti-Repressionswelle.
Nachrichten und Themenbeiträge zu Repression und Aktivismus.
Jeden vierten Sonntag auf RDL 102,3 MHz.
This report is about current repression against anti-fascist and left-wing solidarity groups in Germany. Anti-fascists are being imprisoned and taken to court. At the same time, the left is facing another serious problem. Bank accounts have been closed. This includes the accounts of Rote Hilfe, a solidarity organization that has existed for 100 years now. This repression is likely connected to the fact that a constructed anti-fascist group in Germany has been classified as a terrorist organization in the United States by Donald Trump. On January 31, Rote Hilfe organized a nationwide day of action, and in Frieberg we were there with our radio group Ausbruch on a demonstration, and we want to share this issue with you using short excerpts from speeches. Yeah, about 100 people joined the demonstration, even though it was not very large, but people came from different parts of the radical left in Frieberg. And the first speech is from the Rote Hilfe group Frieberg.
In November and
December 2025, solidarity-based organizations and individuals lost their bank accounts, often without a clear explanation, sometimes immediately. This practice is called deBanking. It means being included from basic financial services, which in practice also means exclusion from participation in society. Those affected are initiatives that work against war, repression and social exclusion. Rote Hilfe is one of these affected initiatives. It now fears for its existence after Sparkasse Göttingen, its bank, and the cooperative bank GLS terminated its accounts. Donations can no longer be received. Membership fees can no longer be collected. Legal costs can no longer be paid. The likely trigger is the classification of Antifa Ost in the US sanction list. By showing solidarity with anti-fascists, Rote Hilfe has now itself come into the crosshairs. They write, "After the termination period ends, we will close and settle your accounts, according to the letter from GLS. The deadline is February 28th. Since then, Rote Hilfe has contacted 20 banks and either received no response or, in the case of Ethik Bank, a rejection." Rote Hilfe was already active in 1921, more than 100 years ago, including here in the southwest of Germany. Even then, it was constantly under surveillance and subject to attempts at suppression. Back then, money was already being collected for political prisoners and refugees, which from the state meant state persecution. In December 2018, Horst Seehofer of the CDU launched a frontal attack on Rote Hilfe, calling for a ban. For the time being, this remained just a threat without consequences. For now, banks and politics are seamlessly continuing the repression of the last 100 years by trying to squeeze Rote Hilfe economically. And this time administratively. That is, without a ban and without a court ruling. The political imbalance becomes particularly clear in the example of Göttingen. Last summer, people demonstrated in front of the Sparkasse there because it provided an account to the AfD, the far-right party in Germany. At the time, the bank said it was obliged to do so. Today, the same bank is criticized for taking an account away from Rote Hilfe. Giving an account to the AfD while terminating one for the anti-fascist support organization is not neutrality. It is a political decision. Debanking here is not occasional, but structural. Currently, it affects Rote Hilfe. Next, for example, autonomous spaces, queer and feminist initiatives, abortion concealing centers, and similar groups may be targeted. They are already in the crosshairs of the US government. If US sanctions lists are effectively deciding who can hold a bank account here, this is a massive attack of emancipatory structures. This affects not only anti-fascist groups, it affects all left-wing and convenient actors in general. That's why we say, stop sanctions and debanking, reserve all account terminations. The following speech was given by the Federal Executive Committee of the Rote Hilfe, Germany.
Liebe Genossinnen, liebe Freundinnen, liebe Sympathisantinnen.
Dear comrades, dear friends and supporters, for many years we have seen more and more repression at all levels. Right now, there are 2 large trials against anti-fascists, one in Dresden and one in Düsseldorf. In these trials, completely absurd charges have been made up. In earlier cases, in the same context, a loose collections of evidence was enough to justify very harsh sentences. Last year, we saw the illegal extradition of Maya. Maya was then faced with a show trial in Budapest, which is now close to ending. Again and again, we see unlawful demands and practices by the federal government. Every new police law limits our freedoms a little more. Recently, some federal states have allowed to use the Palantir software against civilian population. Now the Minister of the Interior wants to expand the power of the Domestic Intelligence Service even further. In the middle of all these developments, we are now facing a new form of repression, debanking. At the beginning of this winter, 2 banks closed our accounts, and we are not the only ones affected. Before us, the DKP and the anarchist Black Cross Dresden were targeted as well. We want to express our solidarity with them once again. In addition to cops who are not held responsible to their own actions, a justice system that favors the rich and reproduces an social injustice, and a domestic intelligence service in which far-right ideas continue to exist. Left-wing groups and organizations are now being weakened by cutting them off from the payment system. We can promise that we are working hard to stay able to act, but even as a large organization, we are only a small part of this system. The more important questions are: who will be next? What will be the next level at which left-wing structures face a new form of repression? And what kind of social climate makes this possible? Before this, the supported group Antifa Ost was put on the US terror list. Did the German government clearly stand up for its own sovereignty? No, instead, Europe submits to every new imperialist push from abroad and also finds its own ways to support the shift to the right. For us, on the left, this can only mean one thing. Dear comrades, now, more than ever, it is time to stand together in solidarity, to organize and to fight for our ability to act. Now, more than ever, we must stick together and not allow ourselves to be intimidated by new forms of repression. Thank you for being on the streets with us today, not only for us, but for an entire movement that lives from and through solidarity, and that we urgently need in these dark times. Solidarity is our weapon.
Gegen den Faschismus, alle zusammen! 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 Gegen den Faschismus!
And a few more additions from mid-February. It has come to light that the accounts of another anti-fascist organization have been closed at another bank, specifically the accounts of the Berlin Association of Persecutees of the Nazi Regime, Federation of Anti-Fascists, VVN-BDA, and 3 of its member associations have been closed. It is possible that the Postbank terminations are also related to the US sanctions list. And Maya, the anti-fascist from Jena, accused in the Budapest trial, was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Maya is accused of attacking neo-Nazis in the margins of the international neo-Nazi event Day of Honor in Hungary. She was arrested in Berlin in December 2023, and in June 2024, Maya was taken to Budapest in a secret night operation. We see this deportation as politically motivated by the right. And in January 2025, the German Federal Constitutional Court also ruled that the extradition to Hungary was illegal. The sentence of 8 years in prison has now been handed down, despite the incomplete accusation, which is based only on circumstantial evidence.
Free Maya! Free, free Maya! Free Maya! Free, free Maya!
If you want to support The Final Straw Radio, you can subscribe to our podcast via various streaming platforms, follow, rate, and share our materials online, and learn more at tfsr.media. And if you'd like to fund our transcription work that allows for easier translation, more accessibility of content, and the zines that we produce for each interview, consider picking up some merch from us or making a one-time or recurring donation via PayPal, Stripe, Venmo, or LibrePay, or joining our Patreon to access early release content and other goodies via the links that you can find at tfsr.media/support. Finally, if you'd like to hear us on your local radio station, visit tfsr.media/radio to find more info or reach out to us for some help. Thanks for listening. This is The Final Straw Radio. The show will later be archived at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and you can email us with questions and suggestions at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net or thefinalstrawradio@protonmail.com. If you'd like to use any episode for your project or radio show, feel free to do so. Just send us an email to let us know. If you care to, you can send us letters at TFSR, P.O. Box 6004, Asheville, North Carolina, 28816. Programming support is brought to you by Firestorm Books. Located at 1022 Haywood Road in West Asheville, Firestorm is a bookstore and social movement space owned by its workers, in operation since 2008. Their event calendar and complete catalog of books can be found online at firestorm.coop.